ensues, and of course the floor is empty, but they're here, and lest we be accused of not hearing all voices, we cut you off a moment ago. This is Alex Jones from Austin, Texas, a radio talk show host.
Yes, sir, with Infowars.com. Both candidates are cousins. They're skull and bones. They're bringing in big government and tyranny. The evidence is clear. The military-industrial complex was intimately involved in 9/11. The commission is a complete fraud. We're losing our freedoms. Both parties are controlled.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Zen, I know that there have been times where people really, they go in as far as saying that the hurricanes themselves are even manipulated or could be manipulated by, government or dark government conspiracies. Do you go as far as to say this as well, or do you believe this is actually natural?
No, absolutely. If you look into and do some research into weather manipulation, you'll find this guy. I believe his name is Bob Livingston or David Livingston. He used to be an old Navy pilot, and he talks about back in the 60s about how they learned even back then how to manipulate hurricanes and how to back then they were researching on how to dissolve them and how to break them down. And that same research was taken over by Black Ops, and it was used as a weapon. And yeah, like that whole Hadron Collider thing, that the experiment that they're doing with the Hadron Collider, where they're creating the Big Bang and doing
one of
research
those right by us.
Right. Well, the HAARP and that Hadron Collider, they are also weapons as well. And if you look into right after the Hadron Collider, that experiment happened a few days ago, there were 4 major earthquakes that happened in China and Peru and in different places. So the things that we're using with HAARP and the Hadron Collider, and there's a thing called the hurricane gun that the Russians have, all these different things are utilized to create devastating effects on countries and their economies using what people think are natural disasters, whether it be hurricanes or earthquakes or droughts or different things like that, rainstorms, and a lot of things, technologies are out there that they're using and utilizing against the populations that people don't even realize. I don't know if you know about the report from Iron Mountain, but this was a report that was put out in the early 60s, late 60s, that talked about how the governments of the world and the rich men of the world came together to decide on whether world peace should be a lasting possibility. And they came to find out then, they made the decision then that war was a benefit to the planet, because it keeps the population reduced and keeps populations from getting blown out. And ever since that report came out, our United States government and other governments of the world have instituted depopulation policies. And you can look up Global 2000, and they even decided back then that they would use not only the food and water and vaccines and different things like that to reduce the population, but also weather manipulation and wars and all kind of things like that. And so the people that don't do their research into what are termed conspiracy theories or whatever, they don't have any idea that the governments of the world are waging wars against their own population and using government-sponsored terror to create a catalyst for the agenda that they want, like 9/11.
Yeah, well, you're right, Zen, in terms of that keyword research, and it can go hand in hand with the way Byron La Beau and Richard Stout have put together the Cursed Net in terms of doing their research within a subject matter that is been ridiculed, that is quite laughable, such as conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, which is all laughed off. However, if you do your research, and I can go right to a piece in Scripture of Hosea 4:6, of lack of knowledge destroys my people, and I'm
Absolutely.
sure you agree with that, Byron.
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, I'm on the same page with Zen as far as his research is concerned. I was ready, willing, and able to accept that 9/11 was a snow job, underlining it, it needed to be some type of an inside job for them to pull it off, because I had done my original research with the Oklahoma bombing. And I really I've delved into that the way Zen is delving into the hurricanes in New Orleans, etc. And I found to my dismay that the only way they could have pulled the Oklahoma city bombing off back in the mid-'90s was through some type of an inside job. There was no other way they could do it, and also control of the media, which seems to be the two ingredients that are necessary for them to, quote-unquote, buffalo the public. And this is what I saw. So when I saw the same fingerprint happened actually in the first World Trade Center bombing, where something was covered up, and it just didn't seem to be the way you should go about doing an investigation. So then when the second one came along, the whole conspiracy was really, to my mind, was ripped apart by the excellent work of Dr. David Griffin in his book,
Absolutely.
Pearl Harbor. Right. And I'm sure you're aware of that book then, And,
yes.
And I'll let you continue. I just want to make one other point about the hurricanes. I was suspicious with Hurricane Andrew way back in the early 90s, and lo and behold, when I read Dr. Nick Begich's book, Angels Don't Play This Harp, he was harping on the idea that, hey, this HARP program, which the government doesn't seem to want anybody to really know about, could be used not only for weather manipulation, but also for mind control. So this kind of fits in with the agenda of, if we have minions working for the dark side, what better way could those minions operate than to be manipulating the weather, controlling the population, and also helping to control the population through some form of mind control. And I know that you interviewed Dr. Joy Pugh, and I've read her book, Even the Knowledge of Good and Evil, and I would love for you to give your impressions about that book and Dr. Joy, because this all is, nothing happens in a vacuum. The way I look at it, and our research indicates that all of these things are happening behind the scenes. They're being hushed by the major media, and the only way you're really going to find out is if you search for this truth, because you're not going to be handed to you on a silver platter.
Absolutely.
So I'll just end there for now and let you continue, Zen, because you're doing a great job.
This is the actual levee that runs along the canal on the eastern side of the city, and when the hurricane hit, the water came through the canal at such force it was apparently too much. You can see the massive breach here, and when you look around the corner, you can see what the water did to the lower 9th Ward. It completely destroyed neighborhoods.
I heard something go boom!
Joe Edwards rushed to get himself and as many neighbors as possible into his truck. They drove to this bridge where they've been living ever since.
My house broke in half. My mother's house just disintegrated. It was a brick house. All the houses down there floated down the street like somebody died.
Was it solely the water that broke the levee, or was it the force of this barge that now sits where homes once did? Joe Edwards says neither. People are so bitter, so disenfranchised in this neighborhood, they actually think the city did it, blowing up the levee to save richer neighborhoods like the French Quarter.
So you're convinced
I know it happened.
that they broke the levee on purpose?
They blew it.